So if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I absolutely love to use a router table. I use it on almost every single project. But in my videos, I usually only show the actual cutting on the router table, and I don't show the setup process of the bit height and the fence location, mostly because getting that set up and getting that perfect can actually be really annoying and quite frustrating sometimes. So I think I found a better way. All right, so let's say I want to make a rabbit on the edge of this board over here, and I want it to go about like a 1/2 inch to 3/4 into this board, and I guess about that high. So what I would typically do, because you don't want to take off so much material at the router table at one time, it's just really not good for your bits or your router or safety reasons. So what I would do is I would take small passes incrementally, moving the fence further and further away from the router bit until I get to the desired location for where I want that rabbit to start. Before you start typing, I know that you can make a really big rabbit on the edge of a piece of wood at the table saw just by making 2 easy passes. But there are definitely times when you have to do something like this at the router table, like if you're using ginormous profiling bits, like this chamfer bit or a tongue and groove bit. You don't want to be taking off all of this material at one time. You want to go in incremental passes, taking off a small amount of wood at a time, and that saves your router bits, it saves your router, it also protects your wood from being damaged, and it saves your fingers as well. Now we know why we need to make this. Let's think about how we're going to make it. So I'm going to make a fence that's going to sit on top of this existing fence. How am I going to attach that without anything getting in the way of a workpiece? So this fence attaches onto here using these knobs and a bolt. So what I could do is I could get a longer bolt because I'm going to have to extend this fence out towards me, and I'll just reuse this same knob that's in here. If your router table doesn't have a fence that attaches on like this, there's definitely a way that we could figure out how to use the T-track that's built into here. Maybe I'll go through that as well. WD-40 has been a sponsor of my channel for a few years now, and I love using their specialist line of products, but something has changed. The WD-40 specialist products that you guys know and love are going to look just a little bit different next time you're at the big box store. Instead of a black can with a yellow top, you're going to see that iconic blue and yellow can with a red top to make it easier for you to find the brand that industry professionals have known and trusted for almost 70 years. Don't worry, nothing has changed inside the can. These are still the same products that you guys know and love, but some of the names have been simplified so it's easier to identify what each product is used for. For example, this Specialist Dry Lube with PTFE. The uses and benefits are clearly written on the front now. Dirt and dust resistant. Awesome. Now it says great for table saws, drills, and lathes. So I'm going to use it on the router table. First, I make sure that everything is nice and clean and free from dust, and then I just simply spray it on all the moving parts. This is really going to help my router lift run smoothly. I'll also spray all the tracks on top here so the fence slides with ease. It dries within seconds, and now I don't have to worry about dust building up in all the moving parts on my router table, and it's ready to use. So I measured the height of the router table fence and then cut a piece of melamine to that width. I chose to use melamine because it's a really slick surface and the wood is going to slide along it really easily. You could just use plywood and then wax it to have the same sort of effect, but I think the melamine is going to work out really great. So now I have to figure out how wide I want to cut this piece. So I'm going to have to anchor this onto the fence, which means that I'm going to have to make adjustments with the knobs every time I want to put it on and take it off. I don't want to have to be adjusting 4 knobs to do that. So I want to do the least amount of hold downs as possible. But if I only do 2 hold downs, like in the center here, there is a chance that these pieces might curve out that way because they're not being supported by a back here. So I'm just going to cut it at a length to where I think that the bolt is going to support the piece and pull it in towards the fence, but it's long enough so that there's a lot of surface area for me to ride my piece along. That seems about right. Before I do anything else to this piece, the way that this whole thing is going to work is that there's going to be spacers behind this fence made out of 1/4 inch MDF. I already have my table saw set to the same width as this, so I'll just go and rip up a few strips of this MDF. I'll cut those spacer pieces to width now, but I'm thinking instead of making them the same size or smaller than the fence piece, I'm thinking maybe it might be a good idea to make them a little bit bigger than the fence piece. That way it creates like a little lip or a little handle that I'm going to easily be able to lift them up and out of the way. So that's what I'll do. All right, now we need to make room for the router bit. So I have a spiral bit in here, but there's most likely that I'm going to use this with bigger bits, like something like this. So I just want to accommodate something that's that big. So I'm really just gonna rough this out to the opening of what I have going on in here. So that ends up being about 2 inches wide, and now I need to set how high I'm going to cut out the notch. Figure this is the biggest, tallest bit that I would use with this. So I'll just set my combo square to that height. Seems about right. Mark it off. Before notching these out, I think that it's going to make it a little bit easier if I first use a Forstner bit and drill holes into all the corners. I think it's also going to look cooler having the rounded opening in there. We'll see. I'm probably going to regret not swapping out the blade on my bandsaw here. This is my resaw blade, and it's 3 TPI, and I feel like it's going to really destroy that melamine, but we'll see. All right, not too bad on the tear out front. It's going to be on the back side anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Now I need to mark on this piece where I'm going to drill for the hole locations to put the bolts through the fence. So I have these in a position where they're good. They're in a good position around here, and these are about 10 inches apart, center to center. So I will mark the center of this front melamine board, and then mark a hole 5 inches on this side and 5 inches on this side to get the locations for those bolts. To determine what length bolt I'm going to use, I'll just line up all of the pieces that I cut on here and see which one's good. This one is too short. That one seems perfect. So I am going to have to drill a hole all the way through this one, but then I'm going to have to recess this shape onto the top so that it will sit flush in there and it won't get in the way of any of my work pieces. And also this locks it into place as you're screwing the knobs on the back. Like with anything when it comes to woodworking, there's more than one way to create the recess for these T-bolts. You can use a Forstner bit and then just drill 2 holes right next to each other, and that starts the shape of the oval for the T-bolt, and then you just have to clean out the middle connectors with a chisel. I prefer to use my router table for something like this, so I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So I set the fence in position so that the center of the bit is in line with where I want to make the recesses for the T-bolt. And then I made start and stopping lines on either side of the fence so that I can plunge the piece down, push it along a little bit, stop, and then it'll create the recess. And now I'll drill all the way through. Now for the spacer pieces, once again, mark out the center, and then mark 5 inches for either side from that center. And I'm gonna mark the hole for this a little bit lower down than I did the fence. That way, when I set these on the bolts, there's going to be a little space for me to lift up on them and to make it easier to remove. I'll just transfer those lines onto the other boards and drill them out. So these holes that I just drilled out are larger than the bolt that I'm going to use to connect the fence. And that way, like, these really didn't need to be that perfect and exact and precise. So there's a little bit of wiggle room when I have to install them or take them out. Now I just need to open up this hole onto the bottom using the bandsaw. All right, moment of truth. Let's see how this all fits together. All right, so this goes on like that. T-bolts go in there. So that all fits in really well. Now these spacers, they fit on like that. Oh, and these knobs don't fit. 1 second. All right, probably something I should have tested beforehand, but there we go. First thing I'll do is set the bit height. So the whole adjustability part of this right now is only on the fence, but you could do this for the actual tabletop to make these incremental adjustments on the actual top of your router table for the bit height. But I'm not going to show that right now, but it would basically be the same exact idea, just on the actual router table instead of the router table fence. All right, so let's just go for 5/8 or something. Okay. Now the next thing to do is actually remove all the spacer pieces from the fence here. And then lock this fence into place. Now let's say I want that rabbet to start 1 inch into the board. So I'll set my combo square to 1 inch and I'll rotate the bit so that like the furthest cutting edge of it is touching my combo square. And then I'll just adjust my fence until it touches. Rotating the bit again, making sure that it's like touching the combo square, not moving anything, and there's no space there. All right, that's looking good, so I'll lock the fence down. Now I need to add those spacers back into this fence. See how many I'm going to need. Why not all of them? And now I'm locking this back into place. It's ready to use. Now see how that took off like a really little amount of material? Now after each pass, all I need to do is unscrew the knobs back here just a tiny little bit. And remember that what I was talking about before with like making the hole lower down so there's a little place for me to lift up. So that's what that was all about. So now I could just lift up one of the spacers, push the fence back into place, lock it down with the knobs, and cut again. And I'll just keep repeating the same process until there are no more spacers left. And without doing any test cuts, let's see how that turned out. That's exactly at the distance that I set the bit at. Awesome. So I'm thrilled with the results, and I think it's going to come in really handy using these huge profiling bits. But I chose to use this bit as an example because you could clearly see how big the gap was getting after each cut, and I just thought that you would be able to understand it more and see it more clearly that way. But I'm assuming that you guys can figure out how to use it with one of these profiling bits because it's the same process, just a different bit. So now let's figure out how we can attach this fence onto another fence that doesn't have these bolts in it like I had in mind. All right, so I'll take the fence off. Now, what happens if I put bolts in here? Oh yeah, okay. Oh yeah, that works. I'm sure you guys see the problem here, but let's get in a little closer. So by flipping the bolts around and putting the head of the T-bolt inside the T-track, you could totally do it like this, totally doable. You would just prepare the pieces a little bit differently, a little bit longer over here so that they touch the bottom, and it would be the same situation where you just remove each spacer piece as you go. Now I'm sure you see the problem here, and that's that there's the bolts sticking out here. So while this does work if you're doing like an edge, like an edge on a piece like that, it wouldn't work if you wanted to do like a bit of taller face on a piece because the bolts would get in the way. So there's definitely a limitation to doing it like this. I just thought of another way. Hold on. All right, get rid of the T-bolts and the knobs all together. Prepare the pieces basically exactly the same. And instead of holding it down with bolts, you could use these Matchfit clamps from Jig. So these clamps they have on this side, they have like this like dovetail shape that all you need to do to make these clamps like fit into things is to route a dovetail groove, and this would go into the top of the piece and then clamp onto the back of the fence here. That could work out really well. I think maybe this would just need to be a little bit taller, but that would definitely work amazing. And then you just need to unscrew the Matchfit clamp and pull out the spacers, screw the clamp back on every time that you need to add in or remove those spacers. This could work really well. I like this idea actually. So there are definitely a ton of ways that you could attach this onto your router table. And what I didn't show is how you would use it on your router table top for like the bit height adjustment. But it's basically the same thing. You just flip it this way. The pieces would probably have to be longer so that you can clamp them onto the edge of your router table here. Oh, the Matchfit clamps would probably be really great for that because they wouldn't get in the way. They would just be on the underside. So I'm going to think that I'm going to use this a lot because I like to, as I'm working, just keep working instead of do test cut and then cut, test cut and then cut. This is set it up one time, set it up to your desired dimension, and then just cut, 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 cut. So I'm really happy with how this turned out, and I'm really happy that I figured out all these different ways that we can attach it to the router table. Thank you so much to Woodcraft and WD-40 for sponsoring this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one. Yeah? Yeah.